Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scots lunch. And Karina has just suggested that all those with Scottish ancestry might like to just come. If I sit down here next to Neville, and between Lennox and Neville, those with Scottish ancestry might like to stand behind and we'll have a photo taken. All right? I don't see too many of you wearing your kilts. So I see friend Paul Curry has one, not big enough to cover everything. And one good thing about the kilts is with the leather straps, they do expand. You can let them out a bit. And I used to wear mine a long time ago when I was working in the town hall as a curator. Gave me a lot of freedom, the kilts. I could climb ladders to the top of the compactus or hang a painting or squat down and arrange an exhibition and then throw on a jacket, and I was looking presentable if I got called to some important function. Anyway, so those of you, come and stand behind me here. Do enjoy your lunch. I brought a few extra ties. My clan's Nicholson, but I don't really like the bright yellow, so I've got something else. But anyway, lovely to see you all, whether you're Scots or not.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to take a couple of minutes of your time just before our meal is served. I'm Judith Francis, and it's my honour today to welcome you all here. It's absolutely a beautiful day. What a wonderful outlook to the Adelaide Parklands. Can't fault that. I'd firstly like you to check that you've put your phones on silent or turned them off. I'll give everyone 30 seconds if you need to dive down. Okay, we've done it. Thank you very much. In respect for Lennox, I think he deserves to not be interrupted. As I said, welcome to you all here today to our Scottish lunch. I'm never sure, are we Scots or Scottish or Scotch? But I'm sure that's something all of you will know far better than me. But it is lovely to be here with you. I can't claim Scottish heritage, yet in the small town I was brought up in, where there are a lot of buxom, dark-haired young women, I did sort of stand out with my fair skin, my slight build and my red hair. So it is natural. And so I used to think, maybe I do have a Scottish connection, but we didn't tell family stories much in my family. So it was a little bit of disappointment when I learned I'm really from the Cornish clans. So I'll have to just claim honorary Scottish descent today. I haven't even really learned a lot about Scotland, which is a shame, isn't it, in my own education, that it focused on English history. But just doing a little bit of reading for today, it was a wonderful lifestyle in the Highlands and the Lowlands of Scotland, and the crofts and the lairds and all of those wonderful traditions that existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. My one time that I have not so admired the Scottish countryside was we drove into Dumfries. Who's ever been to Dumfries? A few people. They were all smiling at me, funny about that. And we drove into Dumfries quite late one evening, and it was already a very short day, so it was quite dark. And we were looking for our bed and breakfast. And so Alan was driving and I was the navigator, a very good navigator. And we came into the middle of the town more or less, and there's Robbie Burns in the middle of the roundabout. And we couldn't find our way where we had to go. So we pulled over to this wonderful couple that were just walking down the street on our side of the road, and I just leaned out the window and said, can you help us out? We're looking for such and such guest house. And the woman said, it's just over there. And we said, well, we know that, but we can't get there. And so the husband said, look, you just go down here, turn there in this beautiful Scottish brogue, and then you have to come in the back road because they've closed the road off. And she said, no, you don't go that way. And so then she told us her way. And then they stood on the pavement and had an argument. And we thought, well, we might get there soon. But in the end, we did a bit of a both ways and we found it. So it's a very strong memory still of Dumfries for us. The Scottish immigrants were a really wonderful group of people and contributed so much to South Australia. And I asked Lennox today what his focus of his talk will be, and it's about the Scottish in South Australia. But having already done a little bit of research, two facts, and I didn't know this, that between the reference I've got, 1838 and 1845, 33 ships with immigrants came from Scotland. That's an incredible amount, and I'm not sure that we were all familiar with that. And as well as coming to South Australia to invest, many of the Scottish immigrants were the poor tenants that had experienced, I suppose, an estate clearance, and so their livelihoods were gone. And one I found is a lovely little example of James Matheson. He was one of the lads, and he owned an island in the Hebrides, and he sponsored 3,200 people between 1851 and 1853 to emigrate to Canada and Australia. And it was cheaper for him to give his tenant and the family a one-way ticket to a distant place rather than try and create work for them. So I wonder, how that must have felt, that they were displaced and shipped off. But we know when they got here, they found fame and fortune. So I've got two duties that I've been asked to do. Sue is writing a report for today for us, and there's a piece of paper going around somewhere. Has someone got a piece of paper that we're asking you to, over that way? It'll go around the tables, and if you can write your name and your Scottish descendancy link for us, Sue will put some of that information into our report. So we'll keep passing that round. And the other thing I've been asked to do is to say a Scottish grace. And had I been aware of this, I would have practiced my brogue. But thank you, Elizabeth, for this. So as we meet today and enjoy a meal together, the words of Robert Burns. Some hae meat and canna eat, and some would eat that want it. But we hae meat and we can eat, and say the Lord be thanked. Thank you.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please? They're going to keep cleaning our plates up for us, but we'd just like to keep moving, and I've been asked to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Lennox Pawson O.A.M. Lennox is a Scottish Australian, born in Glasgow, and he emigrated with his parents in 1938. He attended Scotch College on a Royal Caledonian Society scholarship for 2 years, and later undertook a Certificate of Sales Management at the SA School of Mines. And I suspect he might have been there about the same time as my father, but we'll get there later. His career took him to positions in Adelaide, Darwin and Melbourne before he retired in Adelaide in 1994. Lennox was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for Community Service in the June 2013 Queen's Birthday Honours, and was awarded the City of Burnside Australia Day Community Award in 2008 for dedicated service to the community. His involvement in community service is extensive and includes Commission as a Justice of the Peace and Chief and Life Member of the Royal Caledonian Society of South Australia. He has also held positions and or served in the Freemasons Foundation, Cancer Council, National Servicemen's Association, Burnside Probus Club, Kensington Park RSL Rotary and the South Australian State Committee of Highland Dancing, amongst others. I could keep going, but as Lennox said, my speech would take longer than his, so that gives you a rough idea. As a descendant of 19th century Scottish immigrants, I'm looking forward to hearing more about their contribution to South Australia. Please help me welcome Mr. Lennox Pawson.
This is the increasing part. Hey, up we get. I'll take it just in case. Just in case. There we go. Somewhere in here. Somewhere in here. Where am I hitting it? That's. I think something's fallen out.
Yeah, just push it back in a bit.
Can you see it? If it comes right through to the other side, you know I've done a good job. Antia, thank you for your introduction, and I apologise for the fact that I was giving you a bit of heartburn, but I've been falling foul of the medical profession for a while, and at the present moment I was on some pills that I wouldn't recommend them at all, but I've got I had a, what do you call it, down your groin? Hernia about 3 years ago, and now the wires have come loose down below, and yes, we're waiting for the doctor to return from his holidays, and then so it's maybe a bit more unsteady than I normally am, but thank you for your introduction. Thank you for your opportunity to speak to you. I think there's one thing in our favour is that I don't have the difficult burr of a Scot, because some people have trouble in interpreting, but no, you've heard the story. I was born over there, but yeah, after all, there are only two types of people in the world, the Scots and those that would like to be. So, there you go. Now, the story I came up with, and I was telling you, Oliver, I've done this about 130 odd times in the last 10 years, or 12. And a friend asked me to give a talk at the Probus Club of Fullerton. And I said, what am I going to talk about? She said, you'll think of something. And that's how it all came together, the Scottish influence in South Australia. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge a patriot of mine, Ron Layton, the past chief of the society, well before me. And where's my other friend that came up and said hello to me somewhere over in the corner there? Yes, hello. And thank you for a very nice lunch. It's a bit more than I usually have, but I enjoyed it much, and I hope you did too. So how we came to put this together was for a friend, and so I came up with the title, The Scottish Influence in South Australia Since the Founding of the Colony. Now there's lots of holes in it here and there because it is quite an amazing state, South Australia, and it is certainly due to some 3,500 Scots that originally started to come into the free country of South Australia, and what they did for the benefit of the colony. We're amongst the very first settlers to come into the state, and I'm not retracting from other nationalities that also played a contributing part, but I think it's fair to say the Scots were leaders in the field. In fact, we're at one stage, I had worked it out, there were about the fourth generation now is still here. They brought their culture with them. I'm sorry we didn't have Greg Gordon as the piper to give you a bit of music to start with, but Greg is another member of the society, Royal Caledonian Society, and he's been our pipe sergeant and a wonderful friend. They brought with them their traditions, I brought a few odd things with me. You can see them here, some books pertinent. This one here, there's some Scots were here. It was written by the Reverend Scrimgeour of the Presbyterian Church at Tusmore. And that's quite an interesting book to, if you get it at your library, because he was a Scot and he wrote it. That's that. It has never ceased to amaze me that Scotland is only a small country, and its incredible beauty. I would presume some have been to see Scotland, have you? A summer's day like we have here today. You've got to be quick over there to get it though. I always thought I had a waterproof coat at one stage, but it wasn't that good. But it's maintained a population around 5 million all these years, and yet we've been great exporters of our community. Quite amazing, quite amazing. It's amazed me that it doesn't matter in Australia, you go to any place, there's always someone has a connection with Scotland. In fact, you go to the mining camps in early days, and probably today still, it was quite common that there'd be a very strong Scottish feeling in those areas. I'd like to tell you a little story about how Scotland is such a lovely place, and that's a pity for many of them when they left. But the story goes that our good Lord said to the Archangel Gabriel, "Gabriel, I wish to give the Scots a beautiful country, high mountains, purple and white heather on the slopes, an abundant rainfall," which is true. It will run down into the burns, fill the blocks with salmon and trout, and the burns water will make Yusi Bertha, or the water of life, or is more commonly known as whiskey. And add the golden fields of barley, highland cattle and sheep. And what do you think of that idea, Gabriel? And to which he replied, "I think you're being very generous, Lord." And the good Lord replied, "Wait till you see the neighbours I'm giving them on the southern sides." Now, the late Dame Roma Mitchell, a former patron of the Society, as well as a former governor of this state, said everyone has a bit of Scotch in them, be it by adoption or absorption. And how true it was. We were having a function with her there, and she had this all in stitches of laughter with that particular little statement, that we all have a bit of Scotch in us, be it by adoption or absorption. Yes. Now, I'd like to give you a general picture of this fellow and his wife, ladies. And I refer to a quotation taken from a book many have probably read called the Reverend Peter Marshall, A Man Called Peter. He was the chaplain, and a Scot, of course, of the United States Senate back in the early 50s. And he wrote that book, A Man Called Peter. And he spoke of the independence that scorns of hardship, the tenacity of purpose that we sometimes call stubbornness, and a deep appreciation of all things religious and political liberty, and will defend it to all cost. That's that quote. As we know, Scotsmen have always been fighting for a cause. Even the Romans of Julius Caesar's time recognised that, and they built a wall across the bottom there at North England to keep them out, but we know that plan failed anyway. Now, your subject today is what we did here in South Australia in the formative years of a free colony. At that stage, it was about 2%. It was only a small start, but we got going. And it certainly made an impression. And since 1836, with the arrival of the buffalo, when they set foot in this land, it was very different to the one they had left behind. But they came from all walks of life, and I won't take you into it with that because I'll mention it later. But they became known for their dominance in certain areas of the colony. And so we'll sort of take a big picture around South Australia. The southeast. Almost every town in the southeast was started by Scots, either in response to servicing a station property or providing a crossroad stopping off point. It was said that they were so prolific you could travel from the southeast to Stirling in the Adelaide Hills, you would always be going through a property that had a Scottish influence. Regrettably, Port Lincoln did have a lovely society over there, but it has closed back in 2021. But I suppose it's a different world today, and that's what's happened. But the Adelaide Hills saw the Scots gather around Mount Barker, which has had a bit of publicity just recently, Inverbrackie, Mount Pleasant, Gamaraka and Strathalbyn, which in Gaelic means Valley of the Scots. Glenbar Homestead. I don't know if anyone's been to the old homestead, but it used to be a place that the Presbyterian churches, as well as other denominations, used for camps at Easter time and other particular times. It was started by William Rankin, and he was a Scottish immigrant, and he commenced building the stone homestead, which from time to time is open to visit at the weekends. And it's the original home, as I can remember it, we were camped as boys in tents, but the girls were in the Glen Bar itself. But it's a very picturesque part of Strathalbyn, and noted for its dry stone walls, which of course was a site of the Scots, because after all the rocks were free and the labour was theirs. In the mid-north, there's distinct Scottish communities: Spalding, Jamestown, Clare, Snowdown, Hallett, Melrose and Blythe. And if only you can remember, and I'm talking to Ross here, so Lyle McEwen, a former chief of the Royal Caledonian Society, also chief secretary of the state of South Australia for some 20 years, were members, and the McEwen family has still got some interest in that area today. So you can get the picture. We're spread around. Down there at Gore and the Fleurieu Peninsula in particular, there's still a little Scotland there to inspect. And the Murray River trade, of course, water of that style seems to be appreciated by the Scots. They like their water, and they did appreciate that part of South Australia. And Murray River trade flourished, and they were moving goods from Gore by rail to Port Elliot. By the way, the railway line was put in by the Scots too. Just a little contribution. Later that line was extended to Port Victor, or Victor as we now know it, because the other port became a bit too hazardous to be profitable. But many of the rivermen were Scottish settlers from Cockensey, which is just east of Edinburgh, and a particular fellow called Captain George Bain Johnson and his young friend Bingham Hutchinson developed the areas known as Little Scotland, which you can still visit today. And I'll try not to explain to get there, but you ask any of the locals, I'll say where that area is. And of course we're here now in the city metropolitan area, and we had some suburbs that were more popular, perhaps might be the word, and Woodville, Goodwood, Morford Vale were little Scottish enclaves, and all these places were distinguished by their Scottish names. In fact, down at Semaphore, there's even a Lennox Street, which was a bit, I never knew it was there till somebody told me. Now, Burnside, it's a typical of an example of such names, with their names of Hay Road, and I'll tell you about this Hay fella, Barsmith Street, Inverness Avenue, Montrose Place, Fifeshire, Caithness Avenue, so it goes on. The first occupants in that area of Burnside was a fellow called Peter Anderson of East Lothian. He's a farmer, and he arrived in 1839 and he built a house and had a little farm he started on Second Creek. And of course in Scotland a creek is known as burn, so hence the arrival of a suburb called Burnside. And there's a little story, a short story of all the names that got from where they came. Now Mitcham's another Scottish enclave with Fife, Lorellan, Kilbride, Loch Ness, all these avenues with all this, and they all contributed to the development of the colony in the metropolitan and country areas. It is interesting, I read here somewhere in my notes, that that the names of 414 cities and suburbs in the Adelaide, Gawler, Stirling, Port and Wollonga metropolitan area, so it's taken pretty widespread, 23% of them were based on Scottish names, so they certainly were making it sure that you knew about it. McGill, the lovely old home out there that's part of one of the universities, some of those homes that those old fellas built, by gee. So that tells me that they did a bit in the whole state. Now, one of the fields that we excelled in was the exploration, and I have to say, and in fact, I hope I brought his book with me, but if not, John McDowell Stewart, his recognition and his contribution, well, you all know the story of John McDowell Stewart, but he came from Dysart, which on the east coast, up from Edinburgh, just on the Firth of the Forth sort of business, and pardon me, he was a civil engineer by profession, and he came to South Australia in 1839, and he worked for the government in the survey department. But in 1844, he went for a wander with Captain Charles Sturt over to where Port Lincoln is today. But his claim to fame was Stewart commanded the South Australian Great Northern Exploring Expedition in 1861 to 1863, which completed the first crossing of Australia from south to north. And he did that without loss of life. It was an incredible thing because we've had other explorers who weren't so fortunate. He took these expeditions in 1858 and 1863, and it was on his last attempt he raised the flag on the north coast of Northern Territory at Chambers Bay in 1862. His trip back of 3,200 kilometres was an amazing survival feat, but he did it, and he's recognised. So where did he finish up? Well, he finished up and he died at 50 years of age, and he's buried in Kensal Green Cemetery in London, right next door to a former governor of South Australia, Sir Richard Graves MacDonnell. He's in the Kensal Green Cemetery, and that area is maintained today by the John McDowell Stewart in South Australia. That's looked after by that organisation in London. And he named the MacDonnell Ranges in the Northern Territory after that particular governor. So you see, he had an awfully big influence in those days. The overland telegraph line, of course, followed the way. The road, Stewart Highway, there we go. But he opened up vast areas in the north for pastoral and mineral development. And of course he's remembered for the name of the highway, Stewart Highway. So there we go. He was one of our great explorers, not only of South Australia, but of Australia. Next little spot I'd like to talk about is education, which is very dear to the hearts of the Scots. It is true, St Andrews University, founded in 1413, was the third university in the United Kingdom. We have to give those southern neighbours at Oxford and Cambridge a bit of credit there, but never mind. Here in sunny South Australia, it was predominantly through the church that schools were operating, and in 1872, Union College, comprising of Presbyterian, Baptist and Congregational churches, was established, but in 1886 the Presbyterians withdrew. Don't ask me why, I couldn't find out. However, St Andrews University College came into being through the generous offer of the family of the late Sir John James Duncan. The property Straths Bay at Mitcham was used in residential college in connection with the Presbyterian Church and in affiliation with the University of Adelaide. So they were very keen on making sure there was education to be held by all. Sadly, the Depression saw the college close in 1936, but you will all remember the place on Fullerton Road today as Mercedes College. So it was quite a size. The Presbyterian Church, which is a talk on its own in those days, was encouraged in 1909 by the minister of Chalmers Church, the Reverend A.J. Wade, to establish a school for higher education for girls. Dryburgh House, with Murray Coghill as principal, was ultimately recognised and declared to be a Presbyterian college for girls in South Australia. It took until 1921 when Watt and Lee, built originally for Francis Faulding, you'll remember that name, and subsequently owned by G.S. Fowler, another well-known identity in the state. And in 1922, Lady Duncan officially opened the school we knew as Presbyterian Girls' College. Of interest, Peter Waite, and I'll talk about him later, made the first donation of £1,000, which is roughly, in today's language, $125. They had some money, some of these boys. Yes. In 1977, of course, Uniting Church came into the being, and PGC became Seymour College in honour of the Reverend Dr. Seymour of Chalmers Church, which was one of the two Presbyterian churches in the city itself. I'll talk about Scotch College later on when I come to Alexander Hay. Now, some of the benefactors of the state. Alexander Hay, well, here he is. Hay Road, Linden Park. Born in Dunfermline in 1820. In 1839, 19 years of age, migrated to Adelaide on an assisted package. I like that. And he was on the ship called the Planter, if you follow the ships. He arrived here owing nothing, owning nothing. He opened a grocery store and from on developed commercial and rural interests and prospered as a businessman, pastoralist and politician. Vice Commissioner of Public Works, Adelaide City Council man, director of numerous boards of the Adelaide Bank being one of them, AMP, to name a few. A member of the Legislators' Council from 1857 to 1891. He was the treasurer of the Council of the University of Adelaide Associations, which was the forerunner of the University of Adelaide. So sea Scots and money go hand in hand. Now, Alexander Hay, whilst our founding chief of the South Australian Caledonian Society, which today we have the honour of being the Royal Caledonian Society, was given that prefix Royal by King George VI in recognition in 1946 of the assistance the Society had made towards the World War II efforts in the way of food parcels. And our pipe band was noted for its, what we call it, razzing people up to come and join up sort of business. So there we go. He, Alexander Hay, wished to establish a boys' school, so he put up a challenge to the community, a financial one, but it didn't come to anything. But in time, Scotch College came into being when the Presbyterian League pledged to lease Kaya College, Unley Park, that Scotch College came into being. And I think I've said, you've mentioned the fact that I had the honour of sitting for a scholarship, and I don't know quite how I did it, but I seem to have been more bright then than I am now. I was so blessed with the scholarship for a couple of years at Scotch through the courtesy of the Royal Caledonian Society. This fella, by the way, was very active in the politics, and he certainly made his mark in our way. He had a home at Linden, just outside of Burnside. And if you want to see anything about it, you just go, the park's on the left-hand side before you get to the top of the road. And it is said that when St Andrew's Day was celebrated in his home, it was a very, very pleasant afternoon, I'll put it that way. He had a country retreat at Victor Harbour. It took him 7 years to build Mount Brecon, and it was his summer retreat of 22 rooms. 32 servants were required to run the home for a family of 6. This is the story of a Scot who came out on an assisted package. Hey? Seems to me that he did very well. Yeah. He was principal donor for the commissioning of the Robert Burns statue, which is another little talk I have. I've got a series of little talks besides this longer one, which I'll keep my eye on. He was the principal donor for the commissioning of the Robert Burns statue, as I said, in 1894. And when he died in 1898, his estate was affected by the severe drought being experienced at that time. But he still had £1.7 million, which is roughly $100 million today's language, even the things weren't that good. Not so well known, but a name, Robert Rogerson, came out from Ayrshire. What else comes from that area? Well-known Scottish product called Johnny Walker. That's another product of Scottish benefit. And he was a master grocer. He came to Australia in 1912, so we're getting a bit modern here. He started in conjunction with a chap called Davis, a central market small goods shop. And he was so good at his job, it became known as Central Provision Stores. Who remembers the old CPS? Forerunner of Coles, Woolworths and all that. This is your Robert Rogerson. Had a couple of unique things about him. He had 40 stores operating ultimately. And I remember one on the Norwood Parade, because that's where my mother took me on my tricycle as a young lad. At the Norwood Parade, CPS on the Norwood Parade. Nobody shopped at the CPS store, that was that. His welfare of his staff was paramount. Managers were sent away for a week's holiday. All staff enjoyed bonuses and were paid overtime. And in return, he was rewarded with loyalty and affection. A canny Scot, and no wonder he was so successful. Never mind the fact that he never married, but that's his only hobby was growing prize-winning orchids at his First Avenue home in Joslin. He died in July 1943. It was the largest funeral procession ever seen in Adelaide, and he's buried with his mother and sister in the Paynham Cemetery. You can see that to this day. His legacy to his sister and bequest to staff over 5 years. The considerable revenue left to Minder Home and the Adelaide Children's Hospital. There's an old bachelor, you know. The trust was only wound up in 1979, 36 years after his death. So there must have been a few bawbees in the kitty somewhere, weren't they? Yes, his epitaph can be found in Corinthians 1, chapter 13, verse 13. I'll leave you to look it up. So Thomas Elder, well, we all know about the Elder family. He donated land for the Morpheville Racecourse at Glengarry, our rotunda in the city there, which he had built in Kirkcaldy in Scotland, built there, pulled down, brought it over here, and there it is to this day, still down there. It is estimated that he'd given away £50,000, which is about $6.2 million, during his lifetime. And following his death in 1897, he left a bequest of £65,000, some $8.12 million, to establish the Conservatorium of Music. I don't know whether that's for the benefit of piping, but that's what he did with the money anyway. Captain Sir Walter Watson Hughes, they came out here in 1840 on the ship called the Hero, which he owned, and he was a lucky fella. He found some stuff up there in the what we know as the Copper Triangle. And then you got Robert Barr Smith, and he arrived via Victoria, we'll concede, but he left a lot of money, and I shan't go into it. But it's unusual, he refused to accept a knighthood. Interesting. George Woodruff Goyder. Well, we all know Goyder. He was another person that went wandering, if I might use that expression. He was our Surveyor General, and he recommended the settlement of Darwin. His home at Medindi called the Myrtles, was built in 1872, and I understand that in 2005 it sold for $3.5 million. So I guess what it's worth today out there. James Calder, not so well known, but he was the son-in-law of Charles Walker, and James Walker joined with Balfour Walker, and that's how you got your pies and pasties in those days. Thomas Elder Bar Smith, well, you all know the Bar Smith family and what he and his family did. Peter Waite, they've just knocked down the lovely home to enlarge the roadway at the present moment, but it has been taken down faithfully and it is being rebuilt where it can never, it's around in Waite now, and it will never have to be moved again. But he, in partnership with Elder Smiths, they were all like this, weren't they? They were keeping together, keeping in the line there. The University of Adelaide was one of his great needy causes, and Herbray House, which you can go and visit today if you haven't. I would imagine you have. A lovely old home, and we've used it a couple of times for things with the Probus Club of Burnside, and yeah. Another unusual thing about him, he refused to accept a knighthood. George McEwen, we've all enjoyed George McEwen's products over the years, and with his fruit trees and all that. And the lovely old place Caledonion, and I think it's still used for weddings today, I think, probably. Yeah. Malcolm Barclay Harvey. The main thing I remember about Malcolm Barclay Harvey was the lovely big steam train that we used to have here in Adelaide, one of these great big long ones. That was Malcolm Barclay Harvey. He was the governor of the state. In fact, I'm somewhere in this, we can tell you how many governors of the state were all Scots. We had them in every place notable. Even the Fire Brigade fellow was a Scot. Now, the Johnson families, not that well known, but the Johnson family of Oakbank, well, they were generous too. They gave the land for the racecourse, you know, and they were very generous. They've made well, yet they parted to the community in general. And so I hope that little brief resume of fellas with Scottish influence better tell you something about some of the ladies that said, I thought you might say that. Well, they were well known. Elizabeth and Lily Waite, well, you know who their dad was. They were the daughters of Peter Waite, of course. What'd she do? She gave £2,000, which is about $250,000, to have the university footbridge constructed. I can't remember what the new one cost, but it was about $6 million or something, the last one. But anyway, the government or the council didn't pay for it. Elizabeth and Lily paid for it. Yeah, and on an occasion, she gave £18,000, which is about $2.25 million, to the University of Adelaide for agricultural research. And we will have to concede that a lot of these donations were going into agricultural development, and the Scots seem to be very good at it. Mary Helen McKillop, well, school teacher, but anyway, she has the singular honour of being the first Australian to be beatified by the late Pope John Paul II. So that's a feather in the cap for the girls. Yeah, Jessie Brown, born in Fife, came out here in 1838 with her husband James, and as it puts it mildly, was a successful pastoralist in Encounter Bay and Avenue Range, retired to Glen Osmond. Upon his death, he left a considerable estate to Jessie. I like that, considerable estate. She passed away in 1893, and having no family, generously provided capital and annuities for relatives and friends. Very nice. The residue of £80,000, some $10.5 million, our language, was used to set up the James Brown Memorial Trust. And the main institutions to benefit were, of course, and still working, was Escort House at Tennyson, the sanatorium up there at Belair, and pensioner flats throughout the state, throughout the metropolitan area. Not forgetting Catherine Helen Spence, because she can be a talk on her own, that young lady. But I will leave it to you that if you want to know more about Catherine Helen Spence, it's nearly a whole page. Incredible. Laura Margaret Fowler, daughter of George Swan Fowler. Now, we all remember E&J Fowler, the merchants. So I think they liked being in that sort of industry. Anyway, but she was our first woman surgeon in the Adelaide Children's Hospital. And whilst on the medical things, we had Dr. Helen Mayo. She graduated from the university in 1902. And a clinical lecturer in medical diseases of children. And the University of Adelaide, founder of Mariba Babies Hospital. I think that's still going, is it Mariba? I'm not too sure. And St Anne's College, Dr. Mayo was the first woman to serve on a university council. So you see, you didn't get left behind. In more recent times, and might be some old scholars here, Dr. Helen Reid came from Edinburgh and became the headmistress of Walford College, or Walford School out there at Unley. Any old scholars? No? But that's more recent days. That's a big long story about the beauties of the Royal Caledonian Society, but it's a bit of a story on its own. But I've summarised here, since the founding of the colony to more recent days, and I better upgrade some of it, Scots have been involved in a variety of official positions. We haven't changed here. I think we're still running at 7 state governors, 2 lieutenant governors, 2 premiers, 2 chief justices, 4 attorney generals, 3 privy councillors, 2 presidents of the Legislative Council, 3 speakers of the House of Assembly, 6 Lord Mayors, 1 Commissioner of Police, 10 Chief Secretaries, of course one was our own more recent times, Sir Lionel McEwen, 5 Commissioners of Crown Lands, 5 Commissioners Railways, 1 Chief of the Fire Brigade, and 1 Registrar of Births, Deaths and Marriages. Our first government printer was George Stevenson, and he wrote the Gazette in those days. And that gives you an idea that they were not only industrial in private enterprise, but they were also very busy in our well-being. Well, according to me, it's about 4 more minutes to go. They've been very kind to listen to me for this period of time. And I'll tell you the original story, so it's a bit out of date now, of the sense of humour that the Scots have. First of all, to have a sense of humour, it's free. And that appeals to any nationality anyway. Now, this is their humour of years gone by. I know I'm dating myself a bit. But there's the Welsh who pray on their knees on a Sunday and their neighbours for the rest of the week. Then there was the Irish. Now, it's all changed now, I know. The Irish, you don't know what they want, but they're willing to fight for it. The Scots, who kept the Sabbath and anything else they could get their hands on. And that leaves us with the English, a nation of self-made men, therefore relieving the Almighty of a terrible responsibility. Thank you for listening to me. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer. I have my father's Presbyterian hymn book. You know, they say the Scots are mean, but they're not. They're just careful. This is my late father's Presbyterian hymn book. And I sort of, out of curiosity, looked at national hymns. And there it is. No wonder they've got the world sign up. Hymn number 631 is God Save the King. So you see, I won't need to have to buy a new hymn book at all because it's already here. See, you never know. Thanks much anyway. There's a few odd things down there. Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions for Lennox?
Oh yes, if you want to ask me questions, I'll see if I can answer them. I think there's some more than capable members of the society in the audience, but yep. Any?
Oh, I think you're free to go. Hold on. Yep.
If you want a bit of light humour, there's a book called Best of Scottish Jokes hidden underneath here. Yeah, all right.
You did mention Mount Barker.
Mount Barker, yes.
Yes,
Had a good Caledonian society up there, very active,
Do
very
they?
active.
Now,
yeah.
there were a considerable number of Scots, but we also had a number of the Quakers who were up there as well. Did the Scots have big land holdings and spread out from there?
I would imagine they would have, but I think you'd have to say the Scots are a careful lot and didn't make big noises about things. They just went quietly about their way, and but contributing, as you've heard. I mean, to say there were probably other nationalities were equally as fortunate in making a pound or two and giving it back into the community. They had a philosophy that if they had it and they could use it somewhere else to the benefit of the community, it was their right and duty to do so. Pity we didn't have a bit more of that philosophy in our way of life today, but there we go.
Thank you, that was very interesting, Leonard.
Yes. Hello, Ron. What curly questions the past chief of note?
I had 1,001 questions, but I'll limit it. More a statement than anything else. You mentioned just very briefly the Highland clearances. And one of the interesting things about South Australia that wasn't very well known at all is that we received very few people under the Highland clearances. The Highland clearances were very much like the movement of the Irish, particularly to the what's now the United States. And of the few ships that came to South Australia, one of them was called the Hercules. And very few of the people who left Scotland under the Highland clearances on that ship reached South Australia. Some went to Western Australia, some went to Victoria. And a great mass of them, well, not a great mass, but a lot of them ended up at Spalding. And Spalding was a Gaelic-speaking community for quite a while. They didn't speak English.
Yeah.
That's one point. The other one, he's not well known in South Australia, but we had an eminent Scottish historian in South Australia, Emeritus Professor Eric Richards, who is far better known in Scotland, New Zealand, Victoria and New South Wales than he is in South Australia. It's just one of those things. Tremendous influence around the world, but largely unknown in South Australia.
A lot of them held their talents under, what's the word? That's under a bush, that's it, yeah.
Well, there are people here in Adelaide who are very well known in Scotland, but don't do their work in Adelaide, which is a great
Conquer
shame.
the Scots, you'd conquer the world, you know. It's quite easy.
I've got a good cellar of Scottish whisky.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Ron. It's nice to see you again. Well, there you go. Any others? We're not as active as one would have thought we would be, but I guess you've got it's called ageing, isn't it? And whilst we've got two nice pipe bands at Scotch College and Seymour College, and the Royal Callies has attracted quite a number of those, our boys and girls will be seen next week, won't it? I shan't be walking. I'm going to stay where I have been able to live for a couple of years now at the War Veterans out there at Myrtle Bank, and they're very nice people to be associated with out there. So I'll just sit in their bus and wave to you. Yeah. All right then? Yeah, I've got this.
Well, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank Lennox for his time today. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and we appreciate you coming out. Most people that are here know that I have a bit of a connection to Kangaroo Island. So I would just like to slide a little plug in for Kangaroo Island here. No, because
right, I know.
there is a very strong possibility that the first emigrant to step off the ship
Is that right?
on the colony of South Australia was a Scot from Greyfriars in Edinburgh. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, you must go and see the ship down there at Port Adelaide.
The city of Adelaide's beautiful. Thank you very much, Lennox. We really appreciate your time.
Have you won another few simple ones? They're in there, and the story of Burns' statue. It's only 5 minutes, but how did it become the first statue in South Australia before light? You know, people go, ooh. So, if you want me again, little short stories like that. No.
I thought when Lennox mentioned the Burns statue, he has been in different positions along North Terrace over the years, but I think appropriately he was moved to go into the forecourt there of the Adelaide Library, the State Library there. But one thing I think is really sad, and if you have a look at it, for years he was missing a finger, and he sort of is pointing like this. And so when I was working with the City Council, I arranged to have that repaired, and he had his finger. But I have a feeling it's gone again. So have a look. And the reason is just the way his hand was placed and the finger sticking out, the birds perch on it. And I think the weight of the birds have taken its toll on Burns's finger. So just a little bit of silliness that you can observe next time you go to the library. Thanks.
If you've been to New Zealand and to the little Edinburgh down the south there, the lovely railway station, you've seen the beautiful station. But it always chuckled me that it was a staunch, in the days of when religious wasn't as friendly as it is today. They got Burns' backside facing the Roman Catholic Cathedral, and I thought that was rather naughty of them, but everybody gets a giggle out of it today, but they didn't in those days. My God, yeah. But that's a little spot to go to in New Zealand, down the south.